Committee. Uh, Today is Monday, December 11th. I'm the committee chair, Darrell O'Quinn. We have Councilor Woods with us, also committee member, and will Councilor Tate be joining us? Okay. All right. First, our second item of business is approval of the meeting minutes from the November 27th, 2023 meeting. There are no additions or corrections. Consider motion to approve those minutes.
Move approval.
All right, second, so that motion passes. We have a new applicant for a CPNC, Our Hearts LLC. Officers, you guys have a report?
Yes, all applicants meet requirements.
Okay. Is the applicant present, Patricia Jones?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, ma'am. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing?
I'm trying to bridge the gap between healthcare and communities with the elderly. As you see, I work for Max Transit, so I pick up a lot of elderly people who not able to ride the bus with wheelchairs and camps, pain. So I would like to offer a range of transportation for them, including pharmacy pickup, groceries pickup, even work with VHR with special needs. I have a lot that kind of like privacy with their kids. So I would like to help in that area also.
So you're going to be providing a wheelchair accessible vehicle for your service?
I will. Starting out, it's gonna be ambulatory
Okay,
until I can get into the business more. And yes, I plan to do it.
so this is specifically non-emergency medical. Yeah, okay. All right. Any other questions, Councilor Woods?
No questions. Congratulations.
Yes.
Move approval.
All right. I second, so that motion passes. So this will go with a recommendation from the committee to the full council for approval, and that will likely appear on the council agenda in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay. Next up, we have on the agenda an intergovernmental agreement between the city of Birmingham. I'm sorry, getting ahead of myself. We have another applicant with Bailey's Taxi Officers.
Yes, he meets requirements. That's everything he needs.
Okay. Is Mr. Childers here? Sir, tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
I'm driving a cab. I'm gonna pick up the people, take them where they going. I've been driving the cab down here for 23 years. So I'm gonna continue just to transfer people where they wanna go when they get in the cab.
All right. And you're just using a conventional passenger vehicle to do that, so it's ambulatory.
Yeah, just,
Okay. All right. Any additional questions, Council Woods?
No, wish you luck. I move approval.
All right, second. So that motion passes, and again, this will go to the full council with the committee's recommendation. And that will likely appear on the council agenda in 2 weeks. All right, thank you.
Joe.
All right. Item number 5, an intergovernmental agreement between the city of Birmingham, the city of Vestavia, and Jefferson County to construct a roundabout at the intersection of Sickert Hollow Road and Blue Lake Drive. Colin Alexander.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Colin Alexander. I serve as Senior Planner for the Birmingham Department of Transportation. Before you is, as stated, an intergovernmental agreement, a tri-party agreement between Birmingham, Vestavia, and Jefferson County. This is to construct, under Jefferson County, we'll be constructing a roundabout at the intersection of Sickert Hollow Road and Blue Lake Drive. This is in the southern part of the city in District 2, not far from the summit. Under this agreement, it's an intersection that it lays both sort of split between Birmingham and Vestavia. Vestavia approached the county about wanting to construct a roundabout there, so Vestavia and the county are going to split the cost of this 50-50. Birmingham is not going to contribute any funds towards the construction of this project. What this agreement is doing is allowing construction to happen within Birmingham right of way. Now, typically, you would get this along with an ordinance, you guys would vote, and you would send this agreement on directly to council. We are still waiting for Jefferson County and Vestavia to execute their part of the agreement before getting an ordinance drafted. And because this is the last committee meeting of the calendar year, and we're expecting those in the next couple of weeks, we wanted to go ahead and have the committee look at this agreement and vote in favor of the agreement, understanding that we will submit it to council with the ordinance attached to it. There won't be any changes happening to the agreement. It's already slated to be voted in the next week or so on the county and Vestavia's end.
Okay. This is, so Sacred Hollow, and that whole area out there is really in and out of city of Birmingham, city of Vestavia, Jefferson County jurisdictions. This little piece just happens to fall in the city of Birmingham, right?
Part of it. So the intersection literally splits between the city of Birmingham and the city of Vestavia.
Okay,
So as part of this, Birmingham is committing to taking on responsibility for lighting within our jurisdiction. But otherwise, the cost of construction is going to be split between Vestavia and Jefferson County, since it was Vestavia's project to begin with.
okay. So meaning that we'll have a light post or two out there?
That they're going to install the light posts, and we'll maintain them as part of our standard lighting bill.
Okay. But otherwise, we're not being asked to,
That's correct. We're not being asked for any financial contribution. All this is doing is allowing construction to happen within the right of way of Birmingham.
okay. And the feeling, well, okay, so I like, just generally, like the idea of a roundabout. Thinking about that intersection in particular, been through there probably more times than I could count. And, it's kind of got a downhill coming by the pump house and Sacred Hollow underneath that and Blue Lake Drive, coming up at a different angle. So I guess, in terms of the city's long-term obligations, there's not lighting there currently, if I remember correctly.
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. And the city of Vestavia wants to do lighting as part of the
So
upgrade, right?
the lighting is part of the upgrade, and part of it is for sightline safety issues. You're talking about the terrain there, making sure that the roundabout is visible as you're coming into that intersection. So it's an important part of the improvement.
Okay. Would we also, are we going to be responsible for long-term maintenance and other than the lighting?
We will be, and as part of this agreement, they're going to be working and getting inspected by our capital projects team and our city engineer before signing off on accepting it. So we're going to make sure that it's done up to the standard that we're expecting.
Who's going to be like kind of leading the project from a project management?
Jefferson County is leading the project.
Okay. Is this similar? We did one similar over off of Lakeshore, right? I don't think it was called Beacon.
That would have been
So-
before my time. I'm not entirely sure. The county's been doing a lot of roundabout construction recently. Most prominently, the intersection at Old Leeds and Grants Mill was done as a roundabout recently. So this is a trend that the county is taking on some really busy intersections around the metro area.
Right.
And I will say that intersection has warranted some kind of an intersection control for a long time, whether that be a signal or a roundabout. So this meets, our inspections previously is saying that it needs some kind of intersection control.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. In general, I like roundabouts, there's no equipment in terms of signals to maintain. I can tell you that it's taken folks a little while to learn the new one out in Irondale. So yield does not mean stop. Um, but otherwise, it's working pretty well. I certainly enjoy being able to move on through the intersection without having to necessarily stop. And traffic doesn't back up on what is that, Old Leeds, nearly as much, I think. So, good deal. Council Woods, what do you think?
Just have a question on maintenance.
Mhm.
Clarity, is our maintenance limited to just the lighting?
So we will be responsible for maintaining the lights. We would also be responsible for road maintenance once the county signs over the improvement to us, and once we accept it. And that's just within the jurisdiction of Birmingham. So Vestavia would be responsible for any maintenance to the facility within the city limits of Vestavia.
I had to clarify that quickly. Says that the county has all of the responsibility.
I can go back and clarify that for sure. But my understanding is that they would. I'll go back and clarify that just to make sure.
That would be 4E. Paid for half the roundabout, not get paid.
No, I think you're right. I think that was one of the ones we actually changed. There have been a lot of revisions of this agreement back and forth, so I think you're correct that we actually got the county to maintain the facility itself outside of the lighting, which we will be responsible for.
You taking any personal credit for getting county to the table to take these projects for us?
No,
No.
no personal credit. Just doing my job, counselor.
There is a victory lap, Tom. All right, I move approval.
Before you get there, let me ask one more thing. So, I'm not an engineer. I don't know how to read engineering documents, but I can look at pictures and I don't see any sort of accommodation for really bicyclists would be the biggest consideration there. This is a preferred route for a lot of bicyclists.
No, there's not any bicycle facilities that are provided as part of this improvement. We're aware of Sacred Hollow in particular being a very popular bike route.
Well, and Pump House is, or I guess that's what I call the uphill. So if you're going back up towards Cahaba Heights
Right.
from this roundabout, the usual route that people take is from Sacred Hollow back up Pump House towards Cahaba Heights, and there's sort of a shoulder there.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a fair point. That's a fair observation. I think from the city of Birmingham perspective, if we have the opportunity for our own project in the area, we can certainly add bike facilities approaching the roundabout. In general, roundabouts are safer for all road type users because you have a better line of sight. So I think it's better than nothing at that intersection for sure, and probably better than a traffic signal in terms of bike safety. And we can look to in Birmingham right away when we have opportunities to add bike facilities in the future. But you're correct. This project will not include any bike specific infrastructure.
It's something to keep in mind about So, I guess it's Liberty Park, is like the main development out there. Long range plans are for that to continue to grow. So, I see, for future casting, there's likely to be more vehicular and, pedestrian and bicyclist, usage. I mean, on that street, there's a lot already in terms of bicyclists on Sacred Hollow already, but, another project out in that area that really points to, the pedestrian needs is that Vestavia is spending a ton of money on putting a pedestrian tunnel under Sacred Hollow
Right.
to access the recreational facility out there.
I think it's a valid point. I think, if
Yeah,
I think that was something that we would have probably brought to the table if we were brought in earlier in the conversation. But as it is, there's no planned
Yeah.
bike facilities, but I do think there's opportunities if we have VDOT projects or City of Birmingham projects that occur in that area for us to look at continued bike infrastructure.
yeah. And another, thing just in general, is that so let me back up for a second. So incremental improvements are good. I think we can move this forward with a recommendation. But remembering back to the last time that, when we recently did resurfacing in collaboration with Vestavia and the county, it took us a long time to get to that agreement because of all of the jurisdictional changes. And, in the meantime, a lot of folks had to utilize substandard roadway, while the folks in government were trying to figure out, a path forward. So, it's just something to keep in mind as we have these types of conversations to like raise these concerns so that we can do better moving forward, at least acknowledge some of the challenges that we've had in the past. And whenever these conversations happen, again, take that opportunity to raise the concern and, aspire to make improvements.
Yeah, I would say to the county's credit, when it comes to strictly Birmingham County partnerships, just the one-on-one partnerships, we have a really good relationship with the county in terms of outlining that. And the county actually, I mean, they're getting to work on their bike and ped comp plan. They have an interest in wanting to make sure that we're aligning their vision with our vision. And so when we start projects together, we've had pretty good success on making sure those kind of things are incorporated where feasible. It gets a little more complicated when there are multiple jurisdictions, and especially when the other jurisdictions are leading the project to start with and we get brought in later. So that does complicate things. And to your point about the bureaucracy challenges of these agreements, we as a city did a really good job with this agreement. I think trying to make this a template for how we want agreements like this to look going forward, especially in terms of how we manage inspections and how we make sure that we're taking on work that others are doing and making sure that it's up to standard for us to accept. So I'm really proud of the work that collaboratively we've done in VDOT and capital projects on this agreement, and hope that it's a template going forward that'll help speed up some of the process.
Okay. All right. So Council Woods, you made a motion, right?
That you didn't take credit for. Whoa.
All right. Second. All right. So that item passes. Next up, crossing reconstruction agreement between the City of Birmingham and Alabama and Tennessee River Railway LLC.
Yes. So this is an agreement a proposed agreement between the City of Birmingham and the Alabama and Tennessee River Railway, known colloquially as the ATN. The ATN is one of our 3 Class 3 railroads operating in the city limits of Birmingham, mostly on the eastern side of Birmingham. It goes, for context, goes from Boyle's Yard, which is the CSX yard, all the way up to Gunnersville and up through Gadsden. So that's the geographic bounds of the railroad. There have been a number of complaints in the last 3-4 years about the quality of ATN's crossings. This is pretty typical for not just the ATN, but for Class 3 railroads in general. Class 3s tend to do less tonnage. They make less money in order to maintain this infrastructure, some of which was put in 100, 150 years ago, and may not carry the same amount of trackage activity as it did at the time. And so it's oftentimes a struggle for Class 3s to maintain their infrastructure, and they look for partnerships and opportunities. Partnerships and opportunities like that, in terms of funding in particular, are very challenging. And while we would like to do a wholesale, here are the crossings of the ATN city limits of Birmingham, let's address all of them all at once, it's a little more challenging than that. And we're going to need to piecemeal some of it, especially when you get into the Diamond intersection at Sloss and how that interchanges with the Norfolk Southern line. So the last year or so, we've been looking at opportunities. We've been going back and forth with the ATN. We're going to continue to have this dialogue because we're going to address long-term all those crossings. But in the meantime, the stars were aligning that 4 of the ATN rail crossings are part of the proposed resurfacing package for next year. That list is still being finalized, so you guys will see that soon. We have a couple more reviews we need to approve before the council gets to review them. But this agreement, in order to get on the ATN's capital improvement budget for next year, needs to be done before the end of the calendar year. So we had to move this a little bit faster. The 4 crossings that we're proposing to work, in which the ATN will fix the rail infrastructure, and then our resurfacing contractor, whoever wins the bid, would go out as part of the paving package and pave over the crossings. The 4 crossings we're looking at are 53rd Street South, the wide crossing at 6th Avenue South/54th Street South. Those are both in District 5, and then 2 in District 2, Brownlee Road and Milner Industrial Drive. So those are the 4 that overlapped geographically with where proposed street sections to be resurfaced are lined up. So this agreement would just allow the ATN to do that construction, and then we would go in and pave that, and it would help us get the crossings fixed while also helping the ATN manage some of the financial burden of fixing those crossings.
Okay. So let me repeat that back to you in my own words, so make sure I understand it. So ATN is proposing to do basically rail work on 4 crossings within the city of Birmingham. They want to do that in coordination with the city of Birmingham, so that our paving projects just go ahead and put the pavement down at the same time that they're doing
That's
the
correct.
crossing work. So in effect, we're helping them because we were going to repave those streets anyway.
That's correct.
But they're going to essentially coordinate with us
That's correct.
so that they can tear up the street and fix the crossing, and then we'll come back and do what we were going to do anyway.
That's correct.
Okay.
The only difference is that typically we do not pave rail crossings. We come up to, I think it's like 6 feet on either side is where our paving bounds typically stop.
Right.
So we are adding a little bit of paving to our package, not a whole lot in the overall scope of it, but enough to actually cover the crossings, so that you'll have one continuous paved street rather than having a gap where the railroad's not maintaining their crossing.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So I know that ATN got a $30+ million ties Chrissy
Yes.
Award
Yes.
to do this type of work.
Unfortunately, that did not include the bounds of the city of Birmingham. It was not for the ATM line entirely, and we actually tried to see if we could tack onto that, but it was geographically limited to the Gunnersville port. So in that area, that's where that Chrissy Ward has. They have another Chrissy grant prior to that, which we're working with them to see if maybe we can add a couple more crossings through that, which is an older grant to improve access around, I think National Cement's location in Ragland that's going to be serviced by the ATN, but that again geographically is more tied to Ragland than it is to the city limits of Birmingham. And we are working collaboratively with the ATN looking at potential Chrissy or Section 130 fund opportunities to, again, to chip away and get all those crossings addressed. But these are the 4 we can do right now.
Okay. So FYI, I don't know if a majority of the ATN line is in District 5 in the city of Birmingham, but
It is.
all right, okay. I think I counted them up one time. There's probably more than 24 crossings in District 5 on the ATN. All of the crossings are in substandard condition, which one in particular I'm kind of thankful for because it's on 56th Street and it basically acts as traffic calming. So I tell my neighbors when they, complain about that, pick your poison, smooth crossing or speeding cars. Anyway, that being said, there's a number of those crossings that are seriously deteriorated.
And we have notified the railroad about it, and that's what started this conversation, is that we brought it to the attention of the railroad, and the railroad was like, we know, we're thin on resources. Are there opportunities to partner? So that's what we spent the last 14 months talking to the railroad, trying to brainstorm different opportunities, different ideas, and trying to program out how we can address these crossings.
I would encourage you, while we're having these conversations with them, to discuss with them the possibility of vacating some of those crossings and perhaps consolidating,
That's been part of the conversation too. I will just put that there. There's, it has not been shot down. It has not been taken up and run with, but it has been discussed. There's no further details than that. Just that the concept has been floated.
Okay. All right. Council Woods.
Move approval.
All right, second. So that passes. All right, and then next up we have cost sharing agreement between the city of Birmingham and Norfolk Southern Corporation for Quick Curb.
Yes. So this, as you recall, Norfolk Southern has done this a couple places, mostly using Section 130 grant funds. This is an equipment quick curb. They're flexible delineators that have been used to demarcate and prevent vehicles from driving around rail gates at crossings. And they have shown to actually significantly reduce fatal accidents at rail crossings. And we've had a really good partnership with Norfolk Southern going around and installing these with various grant fundings, and we have taken on the maintenance responsibility afterwards. If you recall, these 3 were actually part of a Section 130 grant about maybe 2 years ago. Norfolk Southern got awarded. But in the ensuing months, there are 2 Section 130 grant accounts that ALDOT manages. And I'm not exactly privy as to why this happened or exactly, but one, the account that it was granted under, they switched which account it was funded from. ALDOT did. When that happened, one of the Section 130 grants has a Buy America clause. And so the one they switched to has a Buy America clause, and that did not correspond to the Quick Curb product. So Norfolk Southern tried to get the decision overturned, working with AlDOT and FHWA. I'm not privy as to exactly how the talks broke down or what happened. But Norfolk Southern came to us and asked if we would be willing to do a direct cost share with them to go ahead and get this project done and then drop the grant entirely from AlDOT. And AlDOT was amenable to doing that. So this is that same project to get these three crossings. They are three very actively used crossings on the west side. We're talking about the Pearson Avenue Jefferson Avenue crossing, the 24th Street Southwest crossing, as well as the 31st Street Southwest crossing near Claiborne Avenue. If you recall, actually, the 31st Street crossing about maybe 6 weeks ago, there was a truck that was hit by a train at that location, caused a fire. So it's definitely a location where we need to have rail safety equipment. So under this, we would split 50-50 with Norfolk Southern, and then they would go out and install the facilities. We are going to be pulling this out of one of our gas tax accounts.
Okay, so are these going to be these AlDOT's not in it at all
No,
anymore?
the AlDOT is being completely taken out. There is no Section 130 funding. If there was Section 130 funding, it would just be between AlDOT and Norfolk Southern. So what we're doing is, because it got shifted around administratively into a different pot of Section 130 funds that had a Buy America clause, the product was no longer eligible to receive those funds. And so while Norfolk Southern tried to work out something with AlDOT and FHWA, it was not going to happen, so they gained us with this.
So is AlDOT giving us a credit on our Section 130 money?
I wouldn't count on it.
We don't have a balance in the bank in their Section 130 bank?
No, unfortunately. No.
Darn.
Some demands call.
I'm only halfway there. But
Well, okay, so I know you're aware of the projects that we're pursuing to
Yep.
relative to the what do you want to call it?
train.
The train detection technology. I think these are some of the same
Two of the
crossings.
crossings. Yeah, this would be two of those crossings. 31st Street and 24th Street.
So, do these crossings have gates
Yes.
already?
Yeah, all of these have gates because the technology, the asset is meant to line up with the rail gates to
Right,
prevent
okay.
drivers from driving.
Okay, so, all right. So this leaves open the possibility that we could get Section 130 for the train detection technology, since AlDOT recognizes the need to do safety improvements at these intersections.
These intersections were pre-approved as Section 130 qualifying crossings, so that would definitely be an avenue to explore.
Excellent. Council Woods, are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Train detection.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we're, FYI,
Is it money call?
Hmm?
Money.
I got the money.
Train detection.
Oh, for train detection? Oh,
yeah.
we'll work on that.
So, we're still pursuing that. Basically, Director Fowler said that, EDOT staff is juggling a lot of projects right now. But that he would support the Section 130 application for train detection technology if we had an outside consultant basically helping to facilitate that process. So we've retained through my office and some work that Councilor Moore and I are doing in Woodlawn with Woodlawn United. We've retained a consultant to help pursue that funding. So just an FYI, trying to move that forward. So this could be good news with regard to opening the opportunity for that project. So this, at the end of the day, this would cost the city of Birmingham $21,670.98
Yes.
for 3 crossings. All right. Council Woods.
Move approval.
All right, second. So item passes. And not lastly, Alabama Industrial Road and Bridge Program Grant Application.
Alrighty, so if you recall about, this was late October, we came before your committee for an A-Trip 2 grant to do improvements at the intersection of I-2059 and Tallapoosa Street, and trying to improve and make it safer for commercial vehicles turning south into the North Avondale area. Part of what was juggling that was we've had a lot of interest from different developers, industrial developers in the North Avondale, East Birmingham area, but the access point from that off of 2059 is challenging for commercial vehicles. So this is kind of a follow-up stage 2 to that. So the first one, which was on a state route, qualified for A-Trip, but is going to put in a signal if we were awarded and make it easier for trucks to turn south. This second one is another state grant opportunity. This is the Industrial Road and Bridge Program. And so this would make improvements along 40th Street, which is geographically the same road, however, changes jurisdiction from Alabama 79 to local jurisdiction at 40th Street. So this would fall under that category because it's not a state route. We're looking to make improvements, including adding some turn lanes, slightly widening the lanes a little bit. There's a traffic signal that has been warranted about halfway down 40th Street that will be installed as part of this. And so this is meant to hopefully accelerate economic development opportunities in the North Avondale area.
So this is really about the proposal related to Stockham Valve site, right?
That is one of the developments that this would be benefiting.
Okay.
And that's the kind of investment that we're talking about, that we've been getting interest over the last 3 or 4 years as a city for light industrial development that just simply is not feasible based off of the current infrastructure coming off of the interstate.
So $3.5 billion. I hate to say this, but it doesn't sound like a whole lot of money relative to
Yes.
that project.
So the 3.5 is what, so this particular state grant, it's a lot of justifying the dollar amount from ALDOT based off of potential job creation and trying to balance how much you're asking. Based off of research from other applications and discussions with ALDOT, we feel that $3.5 million is a reasonable ask. There is no actual match from the city of Birmingham specifically. However, anything that would be over the grant amount would be the responsibility of the city.
So big picture, what is it going to take between Richard Arrington North and 2059 to make improvements along 40th Street so that Coca-Cola United can go in and do what they've been trying to do for the last more than a decade at the old Stockham Valve site? What's the price tag on that?
For the road improvements themselves,
Yeah, to make the old Stockham Valve site, attractive to whatever you want to call it, redevelopment. I mean, $3.5 million. Am I right in assuming that $3.5 million is not going to get that project done?
You jump in?
Yeah, I'm gonna have Andrew from Shoal, who's a consultant who's been helping us develop the roadway project, kind of speak more to the technical side of that.
Okay.
So the A-Trip project,
And can you hit on
Yes,
what we're doing? Because I remember something else that came that had a map to it that I felt was 3.5 million, but sounds like you're talking about more.
I don't know.
Honestly, you'll know about.
yeah, so let's maybe begin the end. I think A-Trip was explained pretty well with the traffic signal at the exit from the interstate, allow the left turn southbound toward Richard Arrington. That's part of that project, as well as a concrete median strip to prevent certain turn movements jockeying to get on the interstate headed toward Birmingham westbound. So we've got a raised concrete median erected with the A-Trip project, which came in at like 1.716 with the total of that project. That was an all-in number that, if awarded, would cover all the scope for A-Trip. Once you get on the south side of the interstate bridge, that's the 40th Street improvement. Today, that's a 2-lane section road, which has been really the limiting factor for industry on that side of town. So that section gets widened out to at least a 3-lane section. We're adding in left turn lanes. Left turn lanes not only for the Stockton property, but also from the Kingston community to access and have, safer traffic movements to the west. But there are sections going to Stockton, it's a double left turn lane instead of a single left turn lane. That's a pretty wide section through there. But that number that Collins mentioned, that $3.5 million number, that you can't cover everything with a IA grant. There are some items that don't qualify, like sidewalks. The traffic signal at that intersection does not qualify because it's already warranted for a signal. It should have been built already, so they don't allow you to qualify traffic signal. That's not included in that $3.5 million number. So to your point, there are some items that will be over and beyond to get 40th Street to the point where it can support industry that's going to move that area. That's beyond $3.5 million.
Yeah, and that's really the point that I'm trying to make is that, like, I am 100% in terms of, doing what needs to be done to reactivate that part of town. And, we have a major, private sector, entity that's been trying to get this project done for a long time. So, this is a step in the right direction, but I also want us to be fully aware of what the larger scope of the project is, and that $3.5 million is probably not going to do everything that needs to be done along that corridor.
Yeah, it's the max extent that can be covered under that grant.
Yes.
So we're going to be pursuing, I assume, other
We're
funding
gonna-
opportunities.
That's correct. We're gonna be looking at every funding opportunity that we can find, in order to complete the rest of it. But this is, the deadline for this grant is December 29th. So we're moving forward with this ask and feel that this is a reasonable amount to ask from AlDOT.
Okay.
But this is also the cap.
Yes.
You have details of this project, folks?
We have some initial renderings that I can have emailed to the committee for you guys to look at. We weren't completely ready to share those publicly because we're still kind of finalizing exactly what the design would look like, but we can absolutely share that.
We have a tight consent meeting here. So.
Well, that explains why you can't give me a dollar figure for the larger project, because we're still figuring it
We're
out.
still tightening up a couple of things, and some of that is also going to be based on just understanding where does the grant get us, and kind of what's possible from there. So yeah, but we have a good sense of what needs to happen, and I think we have a good sense of where the funding avenues are. We just have to step by step it.
Okay. No, I know that Councilor Moore in particular would, it's got to be a high priority project for him. So I'm sure he would also appreciate being kept up to speed.
Absolutely. But he's aware of the application, so he knows each step that we're doing.
Okay. All right, Council Woods. All right, second, so that item passes. Alabama Waldorf School, reduce school zone speed limit.
Yes. So this is the result of sort of two parallel issues that were happening starting back in 2021. The first is that we got a request from the Waldorf school for a school speed zone. There have been concerns. So for context, the Alabama Waldorf School is located on Crestwood Boulevard, not far from the Home Depot. Sort of just around the corner there. Crestwood Boulevard is US 78, so it is an ALDOT right of way. So they've been requesting the school speed zone. We've been trying to figure out how to establish that because the only point of access into the school is off of Crestwood Boulevard. There's no local road entering into Waldorf School. Concurrently, in 2021, as you recall, the state law on school speed zones changed. So prior to 2021, state code stated that school speed zones were required for every school, every public school that was in an unincorporated county area. But if you were in an incorporated area, it was up to the local jurisdiction whether or not they wanted to put a school speed zone. So it was sort of an option. In 2021, that changed, and now the state requires that school speed zones are installed for every public and private school in the state, regardless of jurisdiction. So we've been working to install those on local roads. It's a tall ask. It takes time because we've got public and private schools, probably over 100 schools that we have to go through and set these up. With ALDOT, it's a little more complicated because ALDOT's process requires an ordinance in order to change the posted speed limit on a US highway. So even though ALDOT is required to install these now, we have to go through a process with them to set up an ordinance in order to legally change the speed limit on a state route or a federal highway and then get it established. So it's taken us some time to work through that process, but this is finally the ordinance that would establish the school speed zone on Crestwood Boulevard for Waldorf School. And we'll be going through this process with other schools located along state routes. Now that we've understood how to go through the process with ALDOT, you'll start seeing more of these so we can get compliant with the change in state code.
Okay, so my major question is explain to me the rationale behind 35 miles an hour versus 25 miles an hour.
There's part of that is ALDOT dictates what the speed limit would be in a school speed zone. That's the first thing. So we actually don't get much say. We have a little more say on the local roads, but ALDOT is the one who comes in and says, if we're going to change it, this is what we're changing it to. The rationale behind that is that typically the reduction in speed limits are within 10 miles an hour of the posted speed limit. So this part of Crestwood Boulevard, I think, is posted 45.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reduction,
people drive 60.
I understand. So the reduction that ALDOT is willing to do, and I think perhaps legally I'd have to go back and check and understand state route policy, but what they're willing to do is 10 miles an hour less than what the posted speed limit is. So that's how they got to that. And we really don't have much say in that process.
So, I mean,
I think the only way
where's the accompanying ordinance? Like, we don't have that in our
not
information with our submissions.
sorry, that wasn't included.
Is there, I mean, have we had so I've heard from Alabama Waldorf, this, section of Crestwood Boulevard falls between, District 2 and District 5.
Right.
And, I've heard from, administrators at the school, and parents, about this issue. And, we also have state law that is mandating that we implement school zones. So one way or another, we are required to do this,
That's correct.
here and every other public and private school in the city of Birmingham.
That's correct.
Okay. Um,
And just
so we're
to-
going to be
just-
seeing,
Just one clarifying point too, though, when you say we, the state code requires that the city of Birmingham install the signage on local roads, but AlDOT is responsible for installing the signage on any state routes. So there's a little nuance with that too. So Birmingham can't go and install signage on Crestwood Boulevard to create a speed zone. It has to be installed by AlDOT, which is why it has to go through this AlDOT process.
but AlDOT requires us to do an ordinance.
That's correct. And
And
so
the ordinance says 35 miles an hour.
that's correct. And so that's.
So what if the ordinance said 25 miles?
So the only thing I can think of is if we'd have to do, and we probably have to do another ordinance, because again, I think AlDOT is basing it off of the 10-mile-an-hour difference. So we went back and changed, because every time you change a speed limit on a state route, you have to have an ordinance. So we might be able to change from 45 to 35 approaching the school and then go from 35 to 25, but that would have to go back through the whole process again. And I don't even know if would work. I'd have to talk to counterparts at AlDOT to see what their position would be. Ultimately, AlDOT has the final say on state and local highways regulations. So,
All right. So the other thing that I don't think has happened is that, well, I don't think this necessarily should be, we should set a precedent, for doing this because we have 100 plus school zones to get in place. But I mean, am I right in thinking that sort of the industry standard for school zones is 25 miles an hour? What was the,
that
ACTO?
so the MUTCD, which I think is what AlDOT goes by, says that a change in speed limit should not exceed 10 miles an hour.
Okay.
So if you're changing from a speed zone, I mean, you could drop it, by 5, like from 20 to 25, no problem. From 20, if you were at 35 to 25, no problem. But if you were to exceed that drop, then that's where you have some issues.
So tell me about the other projects that are on state routes that we're going to be having to come before us with the same.
With this with this ordinance for other schools.
Yes.
So, for instance, we will have to do the First Avenue North has a number of schools. In fact, has most of them. So if you follow First Avenue North, you hit Cornerstone in Woodlawn, you hit Woodlawn High School, you hit the I-3 Academy that's at the former St. Barnabas School. And you keep going up, eventually you hit, I have to look at parameters too within the state code, because there's a number of them in District 1 that are off of Parkway East that I just have to double check. The legislation says that it has to be with any road touching a school ground. So I have to double check the boundaries of the school properties to see if there's some of those along Parkway East, like Huffman Middle, Huffman High School. They're very close to State Route 75. So I have to double check to make sure that it borders the roadway. Those are some examples of ones that we're going to have to get AlDOT to, at least on First Avenue North, for instance, they have to put the signage. Adjacent roads that come into that are local, we would put in the signage.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking about, So the MUTCD standard is good to know, and it's hard to dispute, those types of, um, sort of industry rule books.
Yeah.
Um, I'm just wondering if we need to have
We as a general hope, it's not necessarily policy because there's every school has different situations. 25 is a reasonable speed limit to have around a school, and that's kind of our target.
right.
When we can do it. There are certain challenges. This is a good example of that where that may not be possible, and so we have to take the lowest speed that we can get.
So, well, why are we doing this one in particular and not sort of moving with all of the state route school
So
zones in the
that's-
city of Birmingham at the
That's
same
the next.
time?
That's the next phase. That's what we're starting to. This actually started. This process started without because this ordinance existed beforehand, right? This process where prior to the state law change, you had to, if it was on a state route and it wasn't and it was in an incorporated area, you could go to ALDOT and ask if this would qualify for school speed zone status. At which case, you would then start the ordinance and they would install it. That's how this one got started. So we actually had gone to ALDOT asking them to investigate this because we got this request before being made aware of the code change. So this one actually had already been in the works and back and forth with our law department and ALDOT for a year and a half, trying to work out the details of this ordinance. Some bad communication, but we figured out this process. Now that we figured it out, that's exactly what you're going to start seeing. Is now that we know we're required to and we understand the steps, we're going to start sending all of these. Maybe not all together because they need to be individual ordinances, but you're going to be seeing more of these coming very soon.
Okay. And will they all be the same times? Because
No, not
this
necessarily.
was unique to.
That's unique to Waldorf School, and the Waldorf School asked for those specific times. And so ALDOT asked us what the school wanted for their times, and that's what was provided back. So there's no standard on time on when it's enforced. There's no MUTCD standard. There's not even a standard in the state code. So it's really up to the individual school and the individual jurisdiction to, it's one of the problems we had when we were trying to go back and forth and understand the change in the state code. It was very vague in certain areas, and this is one of them where there was no set like from this time to this time, or when children are present, or when lights are flashing. There's a lot of variance in that signage. In this case, ALDOT specifically asked for hours and specifically asked us to reach out to the school to find out what hours they wanted, and that was the hours that the school came back with.
So since the state is requiring us to do this and ALDOT is installing the equipment, is the state also going to supply the state trooper to enforce it?
That I couldn't answer. I don't.
These are rhetorical questions.
Yeah, I understand. I understand.
Okay.
But to your point about doing them, and we would ideally have done these all together all at once. It's just the timing of the process that this one predated our notice of the change in code. So,
Yeah.
and now that we understand what's expected in the process, we're going to start getting all of the other ones. So we have at least all the state route ones done as we continue to implement them across the city.
I mean, the thing that I'm thinking about with respect to the speed limit, and I think Alabama Waldorf is a little different. Typically around a school zone, you have lots of kids walking to school.
Right.
And that's really important with respect to the posted speed limit for a school zone because the number of fatalities and serious injuries increases dramatically over 25 miles an hour. However, I think Alabama Waldorf, in part because it's located on a major highway, those kids aren't walking to school to the best of my knowledge. But in the context of, you know, Cornerstone or I3 Academy or, um, Hoffman, you're already going to have a lot more of those kids, because in part because, if you live within 2 miles of the school, you don't get bus
service, right?
Yeah.
But
So,
especially for public schools, private schools, it's a
right.
it may be a little different, but
Yeah.
yeah, you do have a walk shed for sure.
So I guess what I'm saying is that I think those are important considerations, and I don't want us to, forget about ultimately what this is about is public safety.
Yep. We at VDOT 100% agree, and like I said, that's where we would like our school speed zones to be in, is a 25-mile-an-hour strike zone.
Okay. All right, Council Woods, got a recommendation? Our motion.
Move approval.
All right, second, so that passes, and then update on traffic calming.
Yes. So, and apologies to Councilor Woods. I know you were out at last meeting. I know this is a topic that interests you. So we went over last meeting an overview of where we were. So if you didn't get that, let me know and I'll provide that to you so you can see where we are in terms of order when speed cushions are going to be installed over the next several months. But in follow up to that conversation, there's been a steady push from this committee, specifically, but a couple of other counselors, about the traffic calming process and having a one-page flyer that will help residents understand the process, because it's a rather complicated process. So over the last, I would say 3 or 4 months, our team has been working on developing and drafting that one pager. So before you is the product that we are putting forward. You guys are getting the first look at this after this meeting. It will be posted on our website under our traffic calming tab. We will also be distributing this through government affairs to all of the city councilors so that you guys have it and you can take it to neighborhood meetings and people understand the process as well.
Just a thought, what I would, it would be cool if, they kind of broke down the steps that they have to go to actually get it. And I get why you may not want to say it, the time frame, but I guess some idea of how long it could take.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. I think here are the two challenges that we kind of have with that. One is, to your point, the time frame. I mean, we have now over 300 open traffic calming cases that we are working through with our team. So that's being able to give firm time frames can be challenging when you have that number. You've got staffing, you've got logistics in terms of ordering equipment. But I think one of the things we need to, and I've harped on this before when I worked in traffic calming, and I will continue to harp on this, that traffic calming does not only equal speed cushions. And I think that in terms of saying, here's the process for you to get speed cushions, I don't know that we can actually say that, because each case is unique. Each case is different. It may have a different solution on this street versus this street. Some of it may be speed cushions, some of it may be striping or other devices. And to be completely honest, the other part of this is that the decision to install any kind of traffic calming device is based off of our speed studies. There have been cases, not many, but there have been cases where we've gotten a complaint, we've gone through and it didn't qualify. So I don't want to be misleading to say you hit this step, this step, this step, you get speed cushions. Because I think there needs to be a little more flexibility and a little more ability for our design team to make appropriate traffic calming decisions. I think I'll definitely take your suggestion, Counselor, back to my director and to our leadership for consideration. But I think for the time being, this is probably where we need to land, just given the nuances of traffic calming.
Yeah, I mean, I think a step very well could be review and
Mhm.
determination.
And that's definitely listed. I guess we could do it more bullet notes, maybe to make it and less text heavy. But if
Yeah.
you know, the process kind of, if you go through that, it talks about we'll receive it, it gets queued, we'll do our measuring speeds and analyzing crash data, and then go through a design process there.
Yeah, so
Makes that long.
I think,
Yes, it is.
Council Woods, is just trying to help educate the public about, some of the things that could potentially be involved in the process of these types of projects.
Just-
A
Sorry.
bulleted list be appropriate. We could put it on the blank side of the one pager. So,
Still a one.
Yeah,
still a one pager.
a back and front one pager, but maybe like so you guys are suggesting more like bullet notes, basically, kind of a quick.
Yeah, and
Okay.
you could even, title it like
Continuum of calm.
or potential steps in the process.
Calm.
Yeah.
But I think
Okay.
perfectly fine to point to speed cushion, maybe stop sign, maybe
Right.
nothing maybe required, like whatever those possible outcomes are.
Okay.
Pointing to that. And then on the time thing, I'm looking at it from the point of view of like level setting expectation.
Yeah.
Like, nobody needs to think something's going like 6 months is going to be the resolution. So,
Right.
and I don't know if you want to get into like.
I think we're still, to be completely honest, we're still figuring out what our timelines are. We were building up the program, and then we've had the major logistic problems post pandemic, and so I don't think we've fully settled on how quickly we can deliver these. I think we're still learning. So I think that's part of it too. Is we're still figuring out what our capacities are for delivering it and how fast that is. But I think to your point about bullet notes, I will take that back before we publish this. And I'll take that back to Director Fowler and get his thoughts on that.
Yeah. And again, we don't want it to, this isn't policy.
Right.
It's more education.
Yeah.
So putting, as many asterisks and disclaimers at the bottom of the list is needed. So,
Okay. Yeah, I will take that back to Director Fowler and the traffic calming team and see what they say
All right.
before we publish this.
Team, there's a team.
There's a couple people.
They're working in progress.
Yeah.
excellent. Thanks for the update.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. I'm certain that Counselor Tate will be very excited to see this if she doesn't have it already.
Go ahead. Put up some ducks.
Yeah. Okay. So that brings us to the end of our agenda. We have a motion to adjourn.
We're powered there. I move adjournment.
And second. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.